Right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, media, entertainment, and so much more. Nick Durst here, along with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, our guest today, if you've been to a Mets game in the last few years, you've probably seen him, but now you'll get to know more about the man behind the face, behind the guy on the big screen.
Yeah. Uh, we both come from a sports media, digital media background, so very good guest to have on regarding that. Multimedia writer, producer, as you mentioned, the in-game host for the Mets, host producer for MSG Networks, and he's done the MC for several events annually. So we're very happy to have him on. We welcome Mike Janela. Mike, good to see you. How you doing today?
Wow. Well, I don't know if I'm one of the biggest names in sports and media, but I'll take it. I'm flattered. So I'm doing better now that you guys are gassing me up and hyping me up. But no, excited to sit here and chat with you and chop it up for a little bit.
Absolutely. We've had a lot of big names on this show. So
I was gonna say, man, when you guys sent that email out, and I'm sure you give everybody kind of the same spiel, but I'm seeing some of the names. I'm like, man, I belong with these good people. But hey, if you say so, it's cool with me.
well, certainly now you do.
All
So
right, exactly.
let's get started because a lot of those big names, especially like I mentioned before, Nick and I come from a media background. A lot of them have communications and media background. A lot of them have attended prestigious communications universities. Many of them, including what was it? I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, Syracuse University, right? So you went to Syracuse, very cold up there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you say many of your guests have attended prestigious universities. There is no more prestigious university in the media world than Syracuse and the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications. Now, I have to just say that they give you at your graduation, you have to be as obnoxious as possible in hyping up Syracuse in media for the rest of your career. Yeah, it's a place that, like you said, it's very cold. So the only reason that's worth living up there in those winters and dealing with 10 inches of snow every day for 4 straight months is to get that education, and more so to get that connection already built in. Now, whenever I meet with someone, whether it's Bob Costas or Ian Eagle or even a number of producers like Mike Tirico, whoever, we have that connection. Hey, I'm a Syracuse guy too. Oh, you too. Boom. And now we're off and off and running. So you can, in any newsroom, sports, desk, whatever room in the country, throw a paperclip and you'll hit somebody that went to Syracuse, it feels like. So it is something that, maybe we're a little bit obnoxious about it. We think we're the best in the business, but I think the proof is in the pudding. You get enough of us out there succeeding and doing what we do that it goes to show you that, those winters were worthwhile, at least in one regard.
So when you were in school there and you're formulating your game plan, putting your tapes and stuff together, was there a particular sport that interests you the most that you wanted to perhaps envision yourself working in if fall was ideal?
Yeah, baseball was always number one because it was just my favorite sport growing up. My dad was an immigrant dad, and he moved to Queens in the early 70s, and the Mets were all the rage. So how do you fit in as a new kid in a new school in a new country? You just follow the team that everyone else is following and talking about. So he didn't get huge into too many other sports, or at least not specific teams as he did the Mets because of that personal connection. So for the first, 10 years of my life, it was just all baseball. And I ended up growing to love a ton of other sports and teams and players, but baseball always had a very special place in my heart. And because of that, we would always listen to and watch Mets games, and it would be Gary Cohen and Bob Murphy and, the whole cast and crew on the radio and the TV side. So that was very much my initial goal, was to be a play-by-play broadcaster, because those were the guys that I loved. And I tell this story all the time. Like a lot of young kids, I wanted to grow up and be a professional athlete, and I wanted to play for the Mets, but I learned by like my second Little League season, that was never going to happen. Just did not have the coordination or the athleticism or the talent at all. But then I remember watching a game. It wasn't a Mets game. I think it was maybe Cal Ripken breaking Lou Gehrig's games played streak or something. And whoever one of the broadcasters was at the time, might have been Costas, might have been Al Michaels, Chris Berman, who knows. They said something like, man, I've got the best job in the world. How lucky am I to be here? live in Baltimore, watching Cal Ripken and being part of this, and they're paying me for it. Pinch me, something like that, right? And my 10 or 11-year-old brain thought, wait a minute, that's actually a pretty good point. Like, if I can not play for the Mets, but what if I can become a broadcaster? I'll get to be at all these games for free and kind of live my dream without having to go through playing all the time and striking out, which is all I did in Little League. That sounds like a pretty cool path. So I was grateful and thankful and lucky enough that I kind of knew what I wanted to do from a very young age. And so that was my path that I had set for myself, was what do I have to do to become a baseball play-by-play broadcaster. And obviously the career has taken a lot of turns since then, but it is something I got to do professionally during and after college. So I got to check that dream, and then life comes at you and you make some different decisions and choices. But that's a long story long about how I decided to do specifically what I tried to do.
So for anybody who's trying to make it in baseball, play-by-play, obviously you start in the minors, you start working in media relations, and you also got to do the play-by-play. You did that for the Hickory Crawdads. So talk to us about that experience and what was the longest and worst bus ride you had to take?
You do a lot more than just the media guide and the play-by-play. You pull tarp when it's raining. You're on group ticket sales. You're in sponsorship meetings. You sweep the floor of the peanut shells and the popcorn after the fans leave. You do it all. So anybody listening or watching that wants to pursue that, just know that everybody's got to do it. So don't feel like you're too much of a diva just because you're the radio person. The Crawdads, man, longest bus ride. It was a weird league at the time. They've since restructured, and geography is different in minor league baseball. But we used to play a ton of teams in North and South Carolina all the time. Then we would make the one big trip that year. And it was from Hickory, North Carolina, which is basically the very western part of the state, like an hour northwest of Charlotte. And our longest trip was up to the Lake County Captains, who play on Lake Erie. They were, I believe, the then Indians, now Guardians affiliate, I believe. And that was, I don't remember, like a 10-hour trip maybe on the bus. And that's a lot. But that wasn't even my longest bus ride ever. The year before, I was in independent baseball. And because there are not as many concerns in terms of geography and keeping, player benefits. Like once you get to affiliated baseball, these are all investments that major league teams are making. So they try and keep things as copacetic as possible. In indie ball, it's just whoever's going to pay you wherever you're going to go. So teams were very far apart, and we had a 12-hour bus ride from Port Charlotte, Florida to Anderson, South Carolina. It was an overnight. We had a night game the night that we took off, or an afternoon game, and then a night game the next night. So not even a day off. It was just game, bus for 12 hours, game. And the bus also had a flat tire along the way at 2:30 in the morning, somewhere on some interstate in like Alligator Alley in Florida. Cost us 2 more hours just sitting on the side of the road. So it's fun now to talk about, but when you're in the moment, definitely something you don't expect to ever have to deal with, but for the memoir one day.
Certainly a grind, very difficult to work your way through those very, very early years. Some of the names before we've had on the podcast: Bill Pito, Liam McHugh, Ahmed Fareed, Len Berman. Len Berman was the name I was trying to name it before. It was on the tip of my tongue before I couldn't and blacked out. But all great in their fields and broadcasters. So we'll talk to you about broadcasting for Villanova football and basketball and being a talk show host for UNC Greensboro.
Yeah, it's kind of chronologically, I guess, after, I did my play-by-play with Hickory. I was already in North Carolina, and it was called at the time ISP Sports over in Winston-Salem, so about an hour and a half away. And they essentially are the hub for a ton of college sports athletic coverage departments, right? Their radio coverage. Now they're like Learfield was someone else. They turned to IMG. I don't know what it's called now. I haven't kept up with everything, but it was cool. It was just a bunch of, guys and girls in their early 20s, and everyone from UCLA on one coast to Villanova and Maine on the other would have their play-by-play people out at games, but then it would all beam into this one studio in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, of all places, and then beam out to their respective local radio markets. So we would have, Ryan and Joe out at the Villanova basketball game against St. John's or whoever, and then I'd be in the studio doing highlights and checking in on them, doing pregame and halftime and postgame show wrap-ups and looking around the country and that kind of stuff. And I'd be on, ESPN 950 in Philly, one of the top 10 media markets in the country, as a 22-year-old doing Villanova basketball, one of the premier programs in the country. They went to a Final Four the year that I was there hosting for them. So that was really cool and really exciting. And it was just something where you're in the geographical area. So you start looking around for other opportunities, and voila, that was a really cool one to be doing college sports as someone who just had gotten out of college not too recently. Was just really awesome to get that under my belt. And then similar story, I'm in Winston-Salem. Well, what's there? There's Wake Forest, there's and there's UNC Greensboro, like the two biggest athletic conferences in terms of being, D1 that would offer that kind of opportunity. So I reached out to both, and UNCG was the one that was willing to take a chance on someone coming in and just doing new stuff for them and creating content. And we did a weekly sort of sports center type show about covering everything that happened that week in the athletic department. We were doing interviews, we were doing play-by-play, pregame show, postgame show, streaming stuff live for fans across the country. And yeah, it was just the kind of cool thing where I thought, all right, I'm here, North Carolina, I moved, down the country. Let's see what else is out there while I'm here. And you just keep trying to stack those things one step at a time. Someone like Bill Pito, who you mentioned, and who I actually know very well from working with him at MSG now, he got to be at ESPN, I think, doing Sports Center when he was like in his mid-20s, but that's because it was the late 80s, early 90s, and that was kind of the new and cool thing. Now, obviously, to get to that kind of level, you got to do a lot more stuff beforehand. And so it's always just been part of my career looking for what's the next like slightly bigger thing or slightly more expansive thing or slightly more responsibility. It's always just trying to climb a ladder and hoping that one day you strike that lightning and get somewhere fast, or you just keep climbing that ladder and you get there a little bit slower, but get there eventually nonetheless.
For sure. So you're doing the broadcasting stuff, then you get this pretty cool job, in my opinion, with the Guinness Book of World Records as a content manager. So I would assume at that time, thinking back, lining that up timeline-wise, when it was and when they're probably making a move more into social media and digital media, and maybe that was how you ended up with the job. But what was that whole experience like for you? And were you there on the scene for any records to be broken?
Yeah, a lot. And not just a cool job in your opinion, a cool job just factually, like objectively. It's just one of the coolest things I've ever had. I'm not a company man anymore, but I do have to correct you. It's Guinness World Records, not the Guinness Book anymore. It's a trademark name. So that's part of the brand training, day one on the job. Still show that I got it. Yeah, so what ended up happening there was I had done a couple of years down in North Carolina doing all those jobs we talked about. And I realized play-by-play wasn't going to be the ticket that I hoped it would be. I was talking to guys in the industry and learning from people. And for every Joe Buck that ends up calling a World Series when he's 25, you have people that make it to maybe a AA team in Louisville or Binghamton. And then there's only so many jobs at the major league level for play-by-play. And there are people that make it to Binghamton and then they're there for 25 years. I didn't want to do that. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up right outside of New York City. So for me, that was always the dream, was to succeed. And if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, right? That was kind of my mantra always. And so I decided I'm going to stop doing the thing where I go around the country to different minor league teams and try and just keep getting play-by-play jobs. And I decided, instead of following the work and seeing where that took me geographically, I was going to choose my geography and see what work I could make happen there. So I decided 2009, I'm going to move back home and see if I can find some work there. And that summer, I didn't find much. I was covering high school football for the local newspaper. I actually had a job at the Mets at Citi Field as a person who takes your pictures when you're there, and then you could buy the pictures later, a job that they got rid of like a couple of seasons later because everyone has an iPhone now and you don't need someone taking your picture for you. So that's like a fun trivia that I got to work there, 10 years before I actually ended up working there now, for sure. So just little things like that, picking up odd jobs. And then on a job board, just a regular old job board, I saw that Guinness World Records, based in the UK in London, was opening a New York City branch to heighten their North American presence. And they were looking for a sports records manager. It's basically a sports expert that would manage all the sports records. So for my first year or two there, that's what I did. Every single record involved with sports that someone attempted or tried to break, it went across my desk. So I'd be watching DVDs at the time or YouTube links, going through affidavits and sealed notary statements and all this requirements that we would ask for people to prove what they did. And it would be me saying yes or no. Or if you had an idea for a new record, I would, with our team, decide if it was something worth creating or not, and then setting up the rules and the requirements for all that stuff. And then on top of that, the coolest part of the job was getting to travel. At my peak, I was probably going on the road 3 or 4 times a month around the world, checking out records and judging them in person to see if they could get broken or not, sports and not. So that was great. And it was a really cool gig, but it was partially at the time just something that I took because it was full-time, it was sports, it was travel, it was benefits. I never had any of this stuff in my life before, right? So it just seemed like really cool. I got to work right in Midtown Manhattan, got to afford an apartment in New York City. You're 25, working in the Big Apple, like nothing's better than that, right? But then after a couple of years of that, as cool as it was, I realized, all right, I'm getting very far off track of what my real dream is, which is broadcasting, being talent. And I decided I'm going to stop the records managing side because I had gotten promoted to overseeing the entire records team for every category, North and South America. And I'm like, all right, this is cool. And I can continue this path, but I want to get back on camera. And so I convinced them, since I was already sort of in-house and that I had done a lot of TV appearances and things like that. To your point, they were really starting to expand their YouTube portfolio and Twitter and all the other social media that were popping at the time. And I just suggested, hey, with my background, how about I start creating content for us? And so they shifted me to a content manager where every week we'd have a YouTube series, the best sports records that were broken around the world. Because we had all this great footage and video. Why not use it of a guy, hitting a golf club backwards or like the longest golf club in the world? Like, we have this. People are going to go crazy for this online. Let's start doing that kind of stuff. Interviewing record breakers, doing, live streaming our different events, writing more blogs, stuff like that. So that's what I ended up doing then for the next few years while continuing to travel the world and judge. And then that got me back on track to, linking up with some other places that ended up being the spot where I would go to eventually get back hosting full time. But yeah, 5 of the most fun, coolest years of my life working for GWR. And you have jobs, you have cool jobs. I have a lot of cool jobs right now, but there's something that you're never going to get to hang out with the woman with the longest fingernails in your conference room, like on a Wednesday afternoon, anywhere else except there. You're never going to get to walk around with the world's shortest woman for a week and be like her tour guide to New York City. Like, no other job offers you that. And the places I went, the people I met, I'm never going to forget it. It was awesome.
Yep, most people love sports and weird crap. So it was very, very unique experience.
Perfect mix.
Talk about stacking stuff. Let's continue rolling through this. Working as a host producer for Zazoom Media and LittleThings.
So yeah, 2 places that are now defunct in a way. So I've worked for a lot of places whose names have changed since then. So Zazoom Media renamed to something else. I forget what, and I don't know if they still exist. But basically and this is the power of networking in this business, they had someone come to us while I was at Guinness World Records about trying to figure out some kind of a partnership for using our great video assets at their production company. And that deal didn't work out, but the guy that came over was, callback, a Syracuse grad and an alum. So that was my intro to say, well, hey, man, even though this didn't work out between our companies, I'd love to chat just you and me sometime. And we did. And he was like, oh, if you're ever interested, we're looking for some freelance hosts to come in and be on camera and fronting a lot of the videos that we make. And that was just my invitation to come audition, which I did. And, ding, ding, ding. There goes back to the whole networking thing. And for a while, I did both jobs at once. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and go to Zazoom and record 2 or 3 videos from 6 a.m. to 8:30. And then I would jump on the 4 train uptown and get to GWR in time for my 9:30 shift and then work that full day. So I did that for a while. You burn the candle at both ends and that's great. But then after a while, you got to kind of pick one or the other. So I decided, leap of faith, I'm going to leave this really cushy, comfortable, amazing job, but I want to do full-time on camera stuff. and I ended up going to ZMG full time. They were basically a company that created 60 to 90-second videos about whatever was trending that day, sports, pop culture, entertainment, whatever, and then would distribute those to different websites. So if you were on AOL reading a story about Kim Kardashian, the accompanying video to that story would be something we produced. And so that was my job then, for a few days a week, going in and doing 3 or 4 videos a day, hosting them, editing them, writing them, scripting them, all that stuff. That blossomed into a full-time opportunity. They liked my work enough and what I was giving them that they had a client that wanted us to make just videos for them alone. And so that's what I ended up doing, kind of being the main person for that for a while. But then in between them and LittleThings, I got the opportunity to go host a show called Padres Social Hour for the San Diego Padres out in California for then Fox Sports San Diego, another brand that doesn't exist anymore. And that was my dream job at the time. I got to host an hour-long talk show on cable TV about Major League Baseball, 7 days a week, live. Like I was on TV. I had commercial breaks. I had a director, a producer, everything. I was like, this is great. This is what I've been working for my whole career. So I left Zazoom for that opportunity, which I couldn't pass up. They unfortunately did not continue that program after my first year there. And so then I moved back again home, and LittleThings was something that came up. They were a huge Facebook content brand at the time, 12 million followers, basically aimed at like Midwestern moms. That was the internal like demographic they were going for in terms of their content. So very different from all the sports stuff and the pop culture stuff I would done. A lot more lifestyle, human interest, animals, things like that. So it was great. We were doing a ton there, and it was a legit TV level like production on a digital side. We were doing 4 or 5 live shows a day with people on Facebook watching. We would get 1 million viewers sometimes, like on a live stream, which would blow my mind. But that was the media and the industry changing at that point. To that point, though, they ran out of money. Facebook changes the rules all the time about what they like to put out and prioritize. And they shifted algorithms, and it kind of crushed the company behind the scenes, and they just couldn't afford to keep the lights on. So I think that brand still exists, but it was licensed out for like pennies on the dollar to some venture capitalist or something. But it was a good experience. I got to turn more sports stuff in there because I was going to try and sneak in sports in wherever I'm working. So I was like, oh, why don't we interview Olympians? The Olympics are coming up. People love Olympics, and let's like talk about their life stories and stuff. So we were able to get gold medalists in there and professional wrestlers and lots of cool people. So yeah, I did that. I hosted a wild animal show, once a week. Zookeeper, come in, bring me a weird animal, sloths, cheetahs, penguins, like ostriches. Yeah, it's been a lot of memories now when I think about it, but it hasn't just been sports. So those 2 jobs, the ZMG and the LittleThings, were kind of my getting away from sports sabbatical before I ended up back doing balls and strikes and timeouts and touchdowns and stuff.
Yeah. So you're a Jersey guy. You go to school in Syracuse. You move to North Carolina, living in the Big Apple. Then you get the chance to go to the beautiful West Coast of San Diego. What has been your favorite place to live? And we'll put like family aside because obviously you'll be tied here, but just your favorite place to live out of all these places you've been.
I'm going to go off the grid, off the board that you presented, because I'm going to dip back into college. And I had an internship, my first ever broadcasting, like, I guess not job, we weren't paid, but first ever like actual broadcasting thing was up in Alaska at the Alaska Baseball League. So I was up there for 2 months between my sophomore and junior years. And I mean, I'm homesick for sure. It's about as far away from New York City as you can get without coming back around the other way. But for 2 months, our ballpark, you look out of the broadcast booth, it's the diamond, it's center field, and then it's the mountains, it's glaciers. And it was just one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen. And then you're out of the game and the sun's up till 2 a.m. So you're going out, you're going hiking, you're going swimming, you're going fishing, you're going to the beach, you're having a bonfire at 1 a.m. with a bunch of other guys that are all your age because they're all in college too. Just the gorgeous scenery, the stuff you can do, and just the fact that it was so random in such a crazy place that I never dreamed I'd ever get to go. And now I was going there to do my dream job. So kind of those 2 things together. And, always remember your first, right? No matter what it is in life. And that was my first time that I was actually on a microphone because someone thought I was good enough to do that for a living. And it's just cool to say, like, I worked in Alaska for a summer. If it was a winter job, I probably wouldn't have been as enamored with
What was
it.
like the high temperature? It was like in the 60s, 70s?
Like low 70s. So you're not surfing
Optimal, yeah.
or anything
Right.
like that, but I sweat super easily. I sweat getting out of bed in the morning in December. So 71 and a little breezy for me all summer. I'll take that 10 times out of 10. So that's my favorite, but it's nitpicking because I did a summer in the Cape Cod League. That was equally amazing to be just in a great beach town like that. San Diego, it was a little slow for my tastes, but in terms of just wanting to go out there, I'd go back on vacation in a heartbeat. Living there for me was a little bit, I missed more of that energy and the hustle of the East Coast, but San Diego, no bad things to say about it or its people. But yeah, like New York, when you add family, when you add friends, when you add the fact that it's always been my dream and my backyard, that's obviously going to be number one. But like you said, taking that, out of account, I've just been really lucky to be in some really cool places doing something I love.
Alaska, super, super cool. You mentioned animals before, so one last stop here before we get to the Mets. On-air host for the American Kennel Club. How did that
Yeah.
opportunity come about? Obviously, you have experience doing digital media stuff, especially stuff related around animals. So did somebody approach you with that, or did you kind of go searching for it?
That's something that I'm still doing. It's one of my ongoing gigs along with the Mets and being over at MSG. It comes back to just knowing people and keeping conversations. That wasn't something that I was seeking out. But the person who had tipped me off that the Mets were going to be looking for people at the time that I was auditioning also knew that there was an opportunity at the American Kennel Club that they were expanding and they were going to be looking for on-air talent. And he had known that I had this experience as well. He's like, would you be interested in going back to animals? It's like, it's the AKC or whatever. And it wasn't necessarily top of my list of things I was thinking about doing at the time, but it's a renowned organization. They had a great content arm that they were looking to build. It was, again, local, and nothing's wrong with animal. Like, there's no bad thing when you're doing animal content. Animals are amazing. Dogs are the best. Everyone loves them. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And that was something where, I went in, did kind of a test run with them, a couple of packages here and there, and they decided, yeah, we like what you bring to the table. So if you like what we offer, we'd love to have you be on as a bit more of a permanent and ongoing presence. So in this business, unless you are someone like, even I was going to say someone like Gary Cohen, who has a Mets gig and a full time, even him in the off season, he's doing Seton Hall basketball. Like, you're always picking up stuff on the side. And unless you're, say, an ESPN contracted person, like I gotta keep the lights on, right? I gotta pay the bill. So when Mets season's not happening, I gotta do something. So you're always looking for other opportunities and other things that'll present themselves. And sometimes it's dogs, sometimes it's basketball, sometimes you have no idea what it's going to be. And I've always been someone that's very open to saying yes to opportunities if they make sense. And it just adds more stories to tell on podcasts like this. So always down to try stuff.
So you just mentioned it as someone tipped you off about it, but how did you find out about this job with the Mets, the in-stadium host, and what was the application process like? Was there like an audition? I'm envisioning you at Citi Field in the winter all by yourself, speaking to nobody with the stadium. But what was that whole process like for you? Obviously, growing up a huge Mets fan. And did you mention in your interview that you did work there once? And so to walk us through that, and then we'll talk about the actual day in and day out grind of the job.
Yeah. Again, I keep bringing it back to networking and connections. And I think anyone that you'll have on the show will tell you how important those are. So when I was at that job we talked about a while ago, the Zazoom Media Group, my boss there, my producer, had a friend who was a talent agent. And he came in one day, introduced, these are the hosts we have working here, et cetera, et cetera. And then, they were Yankees fans, so they were talking about that. I was talking about being a Mets fan, just completely unrelated, just, shooting the breeze. And that agent, I believe, represented the person who was the Mets host at the time, or one of their hosts at the time. And so he knew that they were leaving to go pursue other stuff. And he remembered that conversation with me and my boss, that I was a Mets fan. And obviously he knew that I was on-air talent. So he asked my boss, hey, ask Mike if he'd be interested in me throwing his name in the ring at the Mets. Because I don't think they publicized the opportunity. It wasn't like, on Indeed or LinkedIn or anything like that. So obviously when I was presented with that opportunity, I said, absolutely, I'd love to. But the timing didn't work out because it was actually around the same time that I was auditioning for that Padres job that I talked about. And the Mets opportunity at the time was as a backup because the guy ahead of me wasn't leaving full-time yet, but they were trying to transition him out. So I had, backup opportunity with the team I loved since I was a baby, or full-time on TV opportunity with a team that I'd always known about, but, moving cross country and never had that a huge affiliation with. So it did for a little while make me wonder which decision I should take. But in the end, the opportunity at the time was just better with the Padres. So I actually had to tell the Mets, thanks, but no thanks. But then after all that stuff that we talked about already with LittleThings and coming back and all that stuff, the guy ended up leaving the Mets full time. And they reached back out to me. Hey, we know you're back in town. If you're still interested, we'd love to, kind of rekindle this connection if you're down. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So what that ended up being in terms of the audition process was, I went in. I remember my co-host still to this day, Emily Reppert, who's there. They brought her in. And brought me in. It was, I think a December or January day. We weren't outside, thankfully. We just went into like the press conference room just to have a little bit more space. And it was, the guy who's now my director there and a couple other people. All right, Mike and Emily, pretend that I remember to this day, it's like, pretend that it's WWE bobblehead giveaway day. And you guys got to get the fans excited to come out for that. 30 seconds, go. And I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, so it was just fortuitous that I was able to like cut a Stone Cold Steve Austin promo kind of thing in there, and that really helped me stand out, I think. But we just did a bunch of that, and it just kind of small samples and things of that sort. But I'd done something similar the couple of years before when I had to turn the job down, so they kind of already knew what I had to offer. It was just a matter of, did I still have it? Had I gotten better? And if I was still interested. And at that point, they offered it to me, and I said yes, and we hit the ground running opening day 2019.
So this past season, what was it like for you, WWE night and the megastar LA night in the building?
Dude, one of the highlights of my career. For anyone not familiar, I mean, at the time, he's gotten even bigger since. But at the time, he was like right on the cusp of kind of becoming this huge thing that he's become.
And the megastar.
I know, literally in his name. And he was also transitioning. Like, remember, he was kind of heel when he was coming up on the main roster, and he was transitioning because everybody was getting behind him and getting this rub. So he was in this moment where, we wanted to work with him for sure and figure something out. And I give him credit because we've had over the past few years, like, got to meet Drew Matter and Kurt Hawkins. They came my first year there, and they came out. They were great. They did some, contests with fans, but they weren't really like involved in doing, stuff beyond that with us. Bianca Belair came last year or 2 years ago, threw out a first pitch. We did an interview with her before the game. It's like a little bit more involvement. And then when LA Knight showed up, we asked, hey man, would you be down for like doing something that lasted the whole night? And to his credit, he said, absolutely. Like,
I didn't say yeah, you just said absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, well, through his representatives. I'm sure if he was responding, he would have said yeah. And then we threw some ideas, and he showed up that day without any clue what we had in store. And I had this idea, and I said, listen, man, what if you and I have like this little budding feud throughout the night? You're in town. I say that, hey, LA Knight's kind of our sidekick for the night. But the megastar's a sidekick to nobody. Nuh-uh. And then like, you kind of take umbrage to that. And you and I, like, you try and take my job throughout the night. Like, you push me off to the side, and he was eating it up. He loved it. And then he was giving us ideas. Oh, what if we do this, or we change this instead? How do we do the finish? And he was just so down for anything. And he had just flown back, I think, from like Calgary the night before, being on Raw, then had to shoot over to SmackDown the next day in like Rhode Island. This guy's on no sleep. just carrying around his like backpack with all his protein bars and everything in there because he's just eating every 10 minutes. And he was just so down to do whatever. And as someone who loves the art, the professional wrestling, it was just awesome to be like in a promo battle with one of the best in the business on the microphone. I couldn't believe it. One of my favorite nights, not just with the Mets, but like in my life. It was sick.
Pretty awesome for sure. So talk us through what you remember from the first game you actually worked with the Mets, and then let us know kind of like what's the daily routine here. So when are you leaving your house? When are you getting to the ballpark? When are you leaving? And I'm really curious to know because especially on some of those really hot summer nights, like how are you keeping your stamina up? Are you eating between innings? Are you eating before the game? What's your go-to meal? You chugging the Gatorades, all that good stuff.
Sure. I remember I have my biggest memory from that first day. Number one is how cold it was because, April at Citi Field with Flushing Bay the winds whipping in. It's even until like June, it can still get pretty brisk out there, as any Mets fan knows. But I remember we didn't have time to do a full tech rehearsal. So everything we do in between innings, there's, videos and graphics and stuff that go with whatever we're doing with a fan or a former player or whatever. And I think because something didn't get done in time, we kind of went through everything in a rehearsal the day before opening day, but we never got to actually do it for real with the matching graphics and the video stuff on the big board. So I remember it was like movie trivia and I had to ask a person a question and it was like a multiple choice. And I had to wait for like the movie curtain to open up and reveal the answers and the choices. And then for like the clip from the movie to play. And I just asked the person and they gave me the answer. And I said, that's right. Like we wrapped the whole thing up before the graphics even started. And the director in my ear was like, Mike, you're blowing way too fast. You're going through everything. Like you got to match the whatever. And in my defense, I was like, well, I didn't know this. No one ever showed me that I had to, match this up, whatever. But, thankfully that was smooth sailing after that. Everybody was happy with, that was just one little speed bump. It sucked that it was the literal first thing I ever did for the Mets was already like going off the rails, but we recovered and obviously things worked out just fine. I've been there, 6 seasons now. Typical day. The responsibilities have expanded a lot, so it depends exactly what's going on that day. Last couple of years, the first game of a series, we would do this YouTube series where we'd go to the batting cage, and as the Mets were coming off BP, we'd grab a player, talk to him about the series, and get that out for fans before the game. So on a day like that, I'm showing up at the ballpark, an hour earlier or so than I normally would. But in general, hit the road, try and get to the park like 2 hours before first pitch. We have our producer and then Emily, my co-host, and we go over the script for our pregame show. That's something new as well that we do now that we didn't do my first 2 years there, but give you like a little 20, 25 minute, Monday night countdown type show to get fans ready for the game. So we'll go over the scripts and go over whatever stats we need. And I'll do my research that I need to do and figure out all the stuff we're going to do, or if we have a guest on that day, how that's going to work, whatever. And then quick bite to eat before first pitch, and then night by night tends to be the same. A lot of the activations we do are the same night on night. We try and mix it up a little bit so that it's new for fans that are there quite often. Maybe tonight you'll be doing wiffle ball home run derby, but then the next night it'll be a stolen base challenge, like whatever. And we'll add some new things if a team is in town, like the Blue Jays that we don't see often. We'll come up with some new, unique Canada-themed game just for that night for a fan to play. And then, it's just doing that. And then once the game's over, in the past, we had done a post-game show on Twitter that I hosted. So we'd stay around after the game for that. If not, just hit the road, hopefully before the traffic gets too bad, and get home. In terms of your question for how you keep the stamina is usually not an issue for me. I love what I do. And just like the fact that I'm doing something I enjoy kind of keeps me amped up anyway. I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life. I'm not like a Red Bull person. I don't do tea, like caffeine. I don't need it. The one thing that does, make you a bit sluggish is when it's middle of August, it's a 1 o'clock game. It's 95 degrees out with 80% humidity. So in that case, I end up watching a lot of the game from one of the sweet air conditioned areas, or like in the shade where the grounds crew is, like in the back, just staying out of the sun, drinking as much cold water as possible, finding as much air conditioning as I can. So I can't watch the games, with my own two eyes live as much as I'd like to, but it's either that or pass out from heat exhaustion on the biggest scoreboard in baseball. So I think it's better to do to stay upright and figure that out. And then when we do have those nice nights in October, I love putting the jacket on and standing outside. Then it makes it all worth it.
Speaking of that big screen, I have a pitch for you. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. So evidently you can see that Nick is the Mets fan between the two of us, but I am the Yankees fan. However, I always
Sorry
make
to
it my
hear that, but
business.
continue.
I always make it my business to get out to Citi Field at least once a year, and it's usually for the Yankees Mets game. It's always for that Subway
Yeah,
Series
you were at
game.
the wild card series.
I
Mets
was.
series.
That was
You
miserable.
go to a lot of Mets games,
So,
more than me.
I have been to more Mets games recently than him. That's a good point. But usually we go there, we hang out with our friends. Usually we take the time to stop by some media people. Our friend Pat Ragazzo is very good. He's been on the show multiple times with us, writes for the Mets. So my pitch is maybe for a Subway Series game, because I think that's the best theme between here. But eventually have Nick and I come out. We do the Unarm right thing. But Nick plays the babyface Mets fan between the two of us, and I play the arrogant heel. And it works if it's a Subway Series game because I could cheer for the
Interesting.
Yankees. But if it's not a Yankees game necessarily, I can still play the heel, right? So maybe you get us on the big board for like a contest or something, and you kind of set me up, and I'm willing to sell what I need to do. I'll play the heel and I'll play my part. Nick,
All right. Well, I mean, if we're putting you through a table or, pieing you in the face, you agree to this. Just let you
Absolutely.
Sounds
know.
like a good idea, Joe. That's pretty creative.
And I will say,
I'll go through a table. Let's do it.
I'm picturing a Mr. Met powerbomb now. I don't know if the insurance liability would cover it, but I like what we're cooking with here. And hey, you wouldn't have to play an arrogant heel as a Yankee fan. That's just every Yankee fan I know. It just comes natural to you. So it wouldn't be too much of a stretch.
All right, Joe. I think you'll get if we're on the screen at Citi Field, you'll get booed out of this stadium.
Oh yeah, it'd be great.
That's a fact. We did do something a couple of years ago with a Yankee
Hogan
fan up here, and just to be like, we can be the nice guys here. And as soon as we even put a Yankee logo on that screen, it was boos like Rock Hogan WrestleMania 21. Man, it was insane.
That's great. I will certainly do my Hollywood Hogan part. I love playing up to the crowd. Let's talk about MSG Networks, doing digital hosting for them and doing betting shows now. And as we all know, sports betting has become this ridiculously huge thing in this country. So talked about hosting betting shows and just doing stuff for MSG Networks.
Just to let you guys know, I severely underestimated how much battery I had on my laptop. So we're down to 7%. Hopefully we should be okay. I don't know how much longer we want to chat. I'm having a good time, but FYI. So MSG was an opportunity that came along because that's something I went out and sought proactively. I had seen that one of their producers was a Syracuse guy. That seems to be a thread throughout this conversation. And he had just gotten promoted. I was reading it in the trade magazine. And I said, you know what, let me try and find this guy's email, make this Syracuse connection, and let me see if there's something there that they can maybe want to talk to me about, hopefully bringing me on for something. Went in, we had a great meeting, really cool guy. And then nothing happened. We stayed in touch for like 8 or 9 months. And just, we got nothing for you. We're keeping you in mind, whatever. And then finally, they had a new, sponsored content a couple seasons ago that they needed a host for. And he reached out to me, or actually I had to reach out to him, just a general checkup. And he's like, oh, I'm glad you reached out because we're looking for this position to fill. Would you be able to come in tomorrow, literally for an audition? We're auditioning everybody tomorrow. And they want to see, what you got. I said, for sure. So I went in, got the job, and then we ran that for a season. But then once you're in, it's a lot easier to do more and more work. You've proven yourself, you make relationships, and that was just the opportunity that I needed. Unfortunately, the next season was COVID, so not much going into the studio, but they were still producing content. NHL was doing their bubble tournament, their Stanley Cup that summer. So they had gotten DraftKings as a sponsor. They were testing out betting content. They knew they could trust me with sponsored stuff. And we did that. I spent a year shooting from home for MSG doing content. And then as sports betting actually legalized in New York, and everything expanded. More people came into the fold, FanDuel as well. So more content that meant. And then, yeah, just more opportunities meant more chances for me also to jump on there, knowing that it was a huge and expanding part of sports now. I think every network or every outlet is trying to get in on that. So it's something that I've always known, like the language, and I've known betting. Not saying I ever did it before it was legal, making sure that's 100%, on the record. But no, it's something I always found really interesting and that I took a liking to. So the fact that you can now do it above board and add that as part of my content offering has been really cool.
So you've been able to obviously interact with a ton of baseball players, but just curious for you, what's your favorite interview or interaction you've had with a celebrity? Obviously, you a great all-time Jeopardy competitor, $100,000 pyramid. You've interviewed Andy Cohen. So who are some of the coolest people you've gotten to interact with, either through those game show opportunities or through your profession?
I'll pick three if you'll indulge me, just for different areas. So for the Mets, I'm picking four already. I'm breaking my own rules. For the Mets, Mike Piazza and David Wright, because they were the two guys that I idolized growing up. And the crazy thing with Mike Piazza, he was back in town 2 summers ago, and he gave us a ton of time. He's like, whatever you guys need. And we did 31 questions with 31. I couldn't believe I got to ask Mike Piazza that many questions. We sat for like 20 minutes. And then I'm sure you guys run into this all the time producing your own show. The video card, as we were transferring all the footage, corrupted and we lost everything. So that entire interview I have with Mike Piazza, my favorite player growing up, awesome interview, gone forever. I don't even have a version with no audio, like nothing. It never existed. I have still photos to prove that it happened, but that was a bummer. But just talking to him in person and realizing, wow, this guy that I used to cheer for as, an 11-year-old is now answering what I'm asking him, blew my mind. And then David Wright was kind of the one Met left that I hadn't got to interview yet after all my time there, out of all the ones that I loved growing up. And I finally got to meet him. It was his first time back at Citi Field since his retirement with the Mets Hall of Fame induction last summer. And just being nicest guy. Like, you expect someone like that to never be as just gregarious and outgoing and welcoming as you think they are, because never meet your heroes. He above and beyond. Like, we were talking about our shoes. We're like doing, what do we do with our hands? He's like asking me about my life. Nicest guy. So David Wright, meet your heroes. He is proof that does happen sometimes. And then the two others I'd say were when I worked for Guinness World Records. One of the records I got to do, we had a deal with the NBA at that time, a partnership that we'd go down there on the All-Star break. Bunch of players during All-Star shoot around the day before the game would try a bunch of records. So we were there. I was judging most half-court shots made in a minute. None of them got it, but it was a team of 5 working, and one of them was LeBron James. And this is the 2012, so the year he was about to win his first championship, but already LeBron was as massive as it gets. He was at the peak of his powers at that time as a player. And he, again, is coming up to me, like asking me questions like, oh, where are you from, Mike? All right, what do I got to do here? Like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I'm doing right. I'm like, wow. So LeBron James, the most powerful, figuratively and literally, basketball player in the entire world, if not athlete, like, he's following my directions. He's doing, like, I'm coaching him. I'm trying to talk to him, and just like, he's cracking jokes with me, putting his arm around my shoulder. And just, it's hard to be, professional sometimes, because you're like, this is really cool. And I want to geek out right now, but you got to play it cool and you got to act, because you're there to do the job. But deep down inside, I was like, man, this is just incredible. This is amazing. And then the last one I'd say was before I got to play on Jeopardy, because he had passed before then, but I got to go on Jeopardy to present Alex Trebek with a world record of his own. And that was, 10 years ago at this point. But I've watched Jeopardy literally every night, or I used to watch it every night since I was 4 years old. We watched it at dinner every night with my parents. And Alex Trebek, along with Bob Costas, I'd say, who I got to meet later with the Mets, that's another really great one through here. Those are the two guys that really influenced me in terms of wanting to do what I do, get in front of a camera for a career, and also just their style, kind of the way they carry themselves. And so for me to meet Alex, present him with something that he was humbled and kind of astonished by, and then get to interview him as well was just like earth shattering. And anytime you can do something that impresses like your grandma and your grandpa who speak no English, but they know, oh, that's the Jeopardy guy that Mike knows. And like, he's with them now. Like that's the kind of stuff that has always stood out to me. So I know you asked for one person and I gave you like 6 and counting, but I've had a lot of cool stuff. So I've been lucky to be able to experience that.
Pretty good list, that's for sure. And, we'll see the next WWE night. Who knows who it could be? They might make the list as well. And that'll be.
Dude, my dream would be Roman Reigns. I've been a Roman guy since people were booing him. So I would absolutely love it. Throw the ones up. Would be great.
Nick doesn't acknowledge
the
struggle.
Velveteens were awesome. Like everybody, or do the Rock style. But I mean, Stone Cold to the Rock obviously would be a whole nother level, but Roman's my guy. So that's who I'm holding out hope for come next season.
All right, we'll see. Mike, last question here for you. In your life or your career, what is your I'm right moment? What I mean by that is a time or place where you wanted to pursue something, you asked somebody for advice that said, Mike, don't do that. It's not going to work out. Terrible idea. You were like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And in the end, you'll see why it is that I'm right.
My entire career is a I'm right moment. You get to Syracuse, and I remember my first day of broadcasting class, professor went around the table. It was like a long, Knights of the Round Table type thing. All right, what's everyone's goal here? What's your professional goal? What do you guys want to do? And all of us were, I want to be the next Bob Costas. I want to host the Tonight Show. I want to host Hollywood News. I want to host the Oscars, whatever. And there was one kid, I remember his name, Clarence Cross III. I remember it to this day. And he said, I'd love to be a producer. I'd love to produce like the NBC Nightly News and just decide, what stories make it to the broadcast and organize a show. That sounds really interesting to me. And we all go around and we're all thinking, man, what a loser. He's the only guy that doesn't want to be on camera. And then the professor goes, all right, let me ask you a question. Who's the smartest person in this room? And we all look at each other like, wait, is this a test? Like, should I raise my hand? And he goes, it's Clarence. He's the only one here that doesn't want to be on air. Because guess what? Like 90% of you are not going to make it. I'm telling you that right now. So from that, cold glass of water in your face moment at the very beginning of literally studying to do what I do, to all the times throughout the years, I'd be unemployed for months at a time. And my parents, who have always been very supportive, would always gently nudge like, oh, are you sure, Mike, you don't want to get into PR or writing? You're so good at this and other kind of stuff. Or people telling me, yeah, you're going to have to live in Missouri for 10 years. You're never going to be able to be on camera in New York City or whatever. I always had that determination and that drive to prove people wrong and prove myself right. And so that just happens constantly. And a lot of my friends and peers from early in my career long ago gave this up, but here I am still going. So to them, I say, I'm right. I was right.
Love it. I hope Clarence Cross III is doing well too. What a name.
I think I got to look him up now. I got to find out what he's been up to because he was producing somewhere a few years ago. But yeah, now I got to go look him up and see what's going on.
That's too funny. Mike, we thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We know your laptop battery is running low.
We're 4%, baby. We're going to make it, I think.
All right, we're going to make it. Anyway, so great interview. Lots of great stories. Again, Nick and I would love to come hang out with you one day soon at Citi Field during the season. What we do here is we always give our guests the last word. So if there's anything else you would personally like to share or promote for yourself, by all means, go ahead and do it. We wish you the best of luck coming this season. I don't wish the Mets really great luck at all, but hopefully
it's reciprocal. It's reciprocal. Don't worry. I appreciate you guys. And come say what's up at the park sometime this summer. Only things to plug, come out and see some Mets games this summer. Anybody watching or listening, come say hi to me if you find me. And then, I'm not on too many social media, but it's just Mike Janela everywhere. Instagram, Twitter /X. I started a TikTok last summer. It's not going great, but follow me there anyway. Maybe I'll put some cool stuff up once in a while. But appreciate you guys letting me have the time. And anybody else interested in talking more, hit me up. And I guess officially, let's go Mets.
All right, there you have it. That's going to do it here for this episode of I'm Right for our very special guest, Mike Janela, my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I'm Nick Durst, and this has been I'm Right.